Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot, loud, and suspiciously confident for a city held together by ambition, cheap wine, and a fondness for public spectacles that end poorly. You blink awake to the sour tang of boiled garum drifting through your cracked window. The dawn light hits your eyes like an accusation. You're not sure you deserve it, though in Rome, everyone deserves something. Your bed, just a sagging pile of straw stained with old rain and regret, groans as you sit up. Your mouth tastes like you chewed on a leather sandal all night, which, considering your luck, is plausible. A pigeon perches on the sill, its beady eyes shining with judgment. You glare at it, but it only ruffles its feathers and coos in a tone that suggests you should try harder at life. Outside, the city isn't waking so much as resuming an argument it never stopped. Voices clash in the alley, a woman demanding her husband return the coin he borrowed, a child wailing over stale dates, a cart driver cursing the axle that snapped 3 streets away. You stretch, careful not to dislodge the mouse curled in your second sandal. The room is so small, you can touch both walls without moving your feet. The ceiling leaks whenever Jupiter feels dramatic, which is often. You rub sleep from your eyes and check the leather pouch under your tunic. Empty. Again. Consistency is something. Your neighbor is already pounding yesterday's dust from a blanket. The rhythm thumps through the wall like a threat. You sigh. One mainstream fact: by the 2nd century CE, Rome was the largest city in the world, housing over 1 million souls in these fire-prone, multi-story insulae. Historians still argue whether the average Roman truly believed the city was eternal, or if that was just something you said when you couldn't afford to leave. You stand. The straw protests under your soles. You notch your belt, spit into your palm for luck, and duck through the splintered doorframe that concussed you last spring. A lesson you never learned. The stairwell smells of old garlic and older despair. Each step sags, scolding your weight. At the landing, you pause to let an old woman pass. She clutches a bundle of wilted herbs like it's a newborn. She doesn't look at you, and her silence is a kindness. You nod anyway. She doesn't nod back. Outside, Rome bellows in full color. Vendors bellow over amphorae of cheap wine. Laundry flaps overhead like surrender flags. You inhale, wet stone, sweat, yeast, and something metallic. Probably the Tiber, trying to remind everyone it still exists. A fringe tidbit. Romans brought water in through 11 aqueducts, some stretching over 50 miles, but many pipes were lined with lead. Historians still argue whether the empire's decline owed more to politics or quiet, chronic poisoning. You cross the alley, dodging a child wielding a goose as if it were a cudgel. The goose hisses, wings spread. You wisely step aside. You've seen how that ends. Your sandals stick to something unidentifiable. You choose not to investigate. At the corner, you pass a mural in progress. Bacchus lounging among painted grapes, purple as bruises. God's grin seems to say he regrets nothing. You salute him. You suspect he'd salute back if he could. You pause at a fountain, trickling a thin stream of water over a greenish film. A pigeon hops up, dips its beak, and stares at you with the same expression as the one on your window ledge. You think about the scrolls that claim Rome as the pinnacle of civilization. You think about your empty pouch. You think about how the pigeons here always look like they know something you don't. You drink anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shoulder past a man hawking figs that smell too sweet to trust. He eyes you with theatrical suspicion, as if your poverty might be contagious. You move on, ignoring his muttered curse. The street opens wider here. A noble's litter blocks half the thoroughfare, 4 slaves straining under its weight while the woman inside fans herself and pretends not to see them. You pretend not to see her. Roman etiquette, mutual invisibility. Ahead, a boy offers you a fig, palm outstretched. You ask, "Define fresh." He shrugs with the resignation of a philosopher. You give him a coin anyway. The fig is warm. You eat it in 2 bites, daring it to betray you later. A trumpet bleats somewhere beyond the forum. Probably a senator proclaiming reforms no one will notice. You squint against the morning glare. Rome sprawls in every direction. Stone piled on stone. Ambition mortared to superstition. A man with a crooked jaw hurries past, clutching a scroll and muttering to himself. You watch him go, wondering if he's important or just pretending. In this city, there's no difference. You adjust your belt, glance back at your insula, and feel the usual tug in your chest, a mix of loyalty and disgust. You're not special. No one here is. You're just one more voice in the chorus of commerce, faith, and desperation. But for now, at least, you're awake. You're moving. And in Rome, that's as close to victory as anyone gets. You walk with no particular urgency, because urgency in Rome only gets you trampled by a mule or accused of theft. The street widens into a market square where the air ripples with competing ambitions. Someone's selling fish that still twitch. Someone else is preaching doom to an audience of exactly 2. You pause just long enough to watch a boy dip a stolen hand into a barrel of olives and vanish before the vendor notices. You wish you were that fast. Your stomach claws at your ribs in protest. You pull your last coin from the pouch you checked this morning. It feels heavier than it should, like it knows it's about to disappear forever. You trace the worn edge with your thumb, then cross to a stall wedged between a candle maker and a woman selling questionable amulets. The breakfast vendor is exactly as you expect. Sharp elbows, sharper eyes, voice pitched to pierce stone. She doesn't bother greeting you. She just waits. You set the coin on her table. She snatches it before you can change your mind and shoves a wedge of barley bread into your palm. It's as hard as ambition left out in the rain. You tear off a piece and chew, the crust grinding against your teeth like punishment. You pretend not to notice the children staring, hoping you'll drop crumbs. You don't. You've learned. One mainstream fact. Most Romans ate a diet heavy on grains, porridge, coarse bread, legumes, because meat was both expensive and suspect. Olive oil, though, was as common as gossip and twice as sticky. Historians still argue whether the diet made them healthier or just prepared them to endure famine without complaint. A shout cuts across the square. You glance up to see a cart listing sideways, its axle snapped clean through. The driver curses in a dialect you can't place, beating the wheel as if it will spontaneously repair itself. A few passers-by linger to watch. Public misfortune always draws a crowd, but no one helps. In Rome, if you dropped it, You fix it, or you leave it and pretend it never existed. You drift along the edge of the market, bread in hand, scanning faces you half recognize. A woman with a pitted scar along her jaw meets your eyes for a heartbeat, then looks away. You wonder if she remembers you. Probably not. You finish the bread slowly, each bite as dry as last year's promises. At the far end of the square, a mural sprawls across a wall, bright ochre, curling letters, a depiction of Mercury with a grin so sly it almost seems alive. Someone has scrawled an insult over his feet, something about a senator and a donkey. You laugh under your breath. It feels good, that moment of shared contempt. The man scrubbing at the paint doesn't join you. His brush scrapes in steady strokes, each pass making the wall more wounded than clean. You move on, ducking beneath a line of laundry strung like faded flags. A fringe tidbit, Roman children made toys from whatever they could scavenge. Rags, bones, clay, dice from knuckle bones, dolls from scraps. You once saw a girl cradle a lump of cloth so tenderly you were convinced it must be alive. A child darts past, nearly colliding with your knee. You turn, and she flashes a gap-toothed smile before vanishing around the corner. For a moment, you envy her speed, her smallness, her ability to slip between worlds without consequence. The road narrows into the Subura, a district famous for cheap rents and cheaper virtue. Here, the buildings lean together like conspirators. Laundry sags between windows, sometimes dripping onto the heads below. You sidestep a puddle of something you don't want to identify. The stones underfoot gleam slick from last night's rain, or someone's bathwater. You pass a shop with no sign, only a painted eye above the lintel. Inside, a woman crushes herbs with a pestle as large as your forearm. The smell curls into the street. Fennel, vinegar, something darker. She looks up once, and her eyes are the color of old coins. You keep walking. A thin man squats by a doorway, chanting under his breath. His hands trace symbols onto the threshold. Protection spells, maybe. Curses. You can't tell, and you're not inclined to ask. Historians still argue whether Roman superstition was sincere belief or just the final refuge of people who had nothing else to cling to. A cat with one ear regards you from a pile of pottery shards. You nod. It blinks, unimpressed. You step over its domain and emerge into a small square where a fountain bubbles with stubborn optimism. You watch the water trickle over cracked marble. And for a moment, you think of your brother, how he used to laugh at fountains, said they were just excuses for men to toss in coins and call it hope. Your throat tightens. You look away. Near the fountain, an old man hawks charms carved from bone. He catches your eye and lifts one, a bird in flight. Protection, he rasps, from everything. You smile without humor. That's ambitious. He doesn't argue. You don't buy it. You keep moving. Past the woman sweeping her step in slow, precise arcs, past a boy dangling a string in front of a one-eyed dog, past a shrine with soot-blackened tiles where someone has left a single coin and half a fig as offering. At the end of the street, a vendor lifts a hand in greeting. You pause. You don't remember his name, only that he once saved you from a collapsing cart. He holds up a sliver of dried fish. You take it. It's tough, briny but honest. You nod your thanks. He doesn't charge you. Sometimes Rome surprises you. Most times it doesn't. You chew slowly as you turn down another alley where the shadows pool deeper than the daylight dares follow. Your steps echo. For a heartbeat, you feel alone. Then you remember, no one in Rome is ever alone. the city is always listening. Sometimes it even answers. You step into a corridor where the walls have forgotten how to stand straight. Every plastered surface wears the stains of 1,000 hands, 1,000 damp winters, 1,000 quiet acts of survival. Here in the Sabura, ambition is a rumor you tell your children so they don't notice dinner is just bread and vinegar. You breathe in the stale comfort, smoke, sweat, and the iron tang of old rain. Your sandals scuff over a mosaic, so worn you can only guess what it once depicted. Maybe a god, maybe a story. Now it's just colored shards with no clear allegiance. You pause to nudge a loose tessera with your toe and imagine it was part of something noble before the centuries peeled it away. Around the corner, a child balances on a barrel, arms spread like a winged omen. He catches your eye, then leaps into a pile of rags, vanishing with a muffled laugh. For a heartbeat, you envy that courage, the confidence that the landing will never break you. A woman sits on a stoop, plucking onions from a basket and humming under her breath. Her song doesn't sound Roman. No martial edge, no soaring pride. Just a melody you feel in your chest more than your ears. She doesn't look up when you pass, and you don't expect her to. One mainstream fact: the Sabura was a tangle of insula, taverns, and workshops, notorious for crime and poverty, but indispensable to Rome's economy. The rich might sneer at its grime, but their luxuries floated on the labor mined from these alleys. Historians still argue whether this neighborhood was a crucible of progress or merely a cautionary tale no one learned from. You slip between two carts stacked with amphorae that sweat dark stains onto the stones. A stray dog noses at the puddles, tongue darting in search of a taste. You meet its gaze and nod. It ignores you. Fair enough. Ahead, the alley opens into a small courtyard bathed in a light too pale to feel honest. A fountain trickles at its center, the water tinged green from neglect. You watch it run over a chipped basin, where some long-ago craftsman carved dolphins that now look more like tired rats. You crouch and trail your fingers through the stream. Cold, real. A reminder that some things keep moving, even when everything else sours. A voice drifts from the shadows. For luck? You glance over your shoulder. An older woman stands half hidden behind a curtain, her hands wrapped around a bundle of laurel. She steps closer and presses it into your palm. "I already used it," she murmurs. "Didn't work." She smiles, wide and cracked, and vanishes into the dark. You tuck the leaves into your belt. Superstition costs nothing, and hope costs everything. You straighten and turn toward a doorway you've never noticed. A lintel carved with symbols you don't recognize. A feeling hums at the base of your skull. Curiosity dressed as dread. You step inside. It's dim. The air thick with the scent of crushed herbs. And something metallic. Rows of masks hang on the walls, each staring without eyes. Some smile, some grimace. Some simply exist. The closest one seems to tilt toward you, though you don't see it move. You reach out, brushing your fingers over smooth wood. The grain is warm, as if it remembers being alive. A fringe tidbit. Romans believed masks could capture the essence of a person. Funerary imagines were kept in family shrines, their features a reminder that death only changed addresses. You pull your hand back and exhale. The room feels closer now, like the air itself is listening. You step carefully between shelves laden with jars, scrolls, and trinkets you can't name. One jar is labeled in a script that stirs something half forgotten in your chest. You don't read it aloud. Some words prefer to remain secrets. At the far end, a curtain stirs without a breeze. You pause, then it parts, and she steps out. Rodigon, the same girl who watched the fire burn, the same eyes that met yours without flinching. She looks older here, though her face hasn't changed, as if the shadows have added decades you can't see. You followed, she says, voice low and amused. You left a trail, you answer. She tilts her head. I always do. You study her, unsure if you're speaking to a child, a ghost, or something in between. She moves like she belongs to none of them. You remember your brother? She asks. Your throat tightens. Yes. Do you remember why he died? You shake your head, though you suspect the answer has always waited behind your ribs. He believed in a story, she says. One Rome told him. One Rome forgot to believe itself. She reaches past you, lifting a mask from the wall. It's blank, no features at all. She offers it. You don't take it. What is it? You whisper. A promise, she says, and a warning. You swallow. The room feels colder now. The masks watch. Or maybe you're imagining it. Rodigon hangs the mask back in its place. She steps closer, close enough you can see a small scar on her cheek, a crescent moon carved by something too sharp to be an accident. You're not the first to come here, she says. Who were the others? She shrugs. They didn't stay. You want to ask more, but her gaze makes the questions die in your mouth. One mainstream fact: Rome's underworld wasn't just sewers and catacombs. Whole generations used hidden chambers to practice rites no senator would dare acknowledge. Historians still argue whether these cults undermined the Republic or saved its soul. Rodigan lifts her hand, resting her palm briefly on your shoulder. The contact is feather light, but anchors you in a way nothing else has. She smiles, not kindly, but knowingly. You'll follow me again? She murmurs. When you're ready. Then she steps back, merging with the gloom as easily as a breath dissolving in winter air. You stand alone among the masks, heartbeat loud in your ears. When you step back into the courtyard, the light has shifted. The fountain's trickle sounds different, like a voice repeating your name in a language you've never learned. You glance once more at the doorway, empty, still, waiting, and you walk on. You emerge from the courtyard into a lane that feels somehow emptier, as if the city itself took a step back to watch what you'll do next. The sky overhead is brighter than before, but the light seems thin, diluted by too many hours of smoke and breath and ambition. You draw your tunic tighter and keep moving. Your sandals slap against paving stones chipped by countless feet. Rome doesn't smooth over old scars. It just walks over them until they look intentional. You pass a doorway where someone has nailed a strip of cloth, a sign of mourning. The wind lifts the rag just enough to glimpse a child's sandal propped against the threshold. You don't linger. Some griefs aren't meant to be measured by strangers. At the corner, you stop to watch two men haul a cask into a tavern. The cask leaks a dark trickle that smells of vinegar and regret. One of the men grunts, "Careful," and the other answers, "Too late." They don't look at you. You nod anyway, because that's the currency here. Small acknowledgments that don't cost more than you can spare. You keep on, skirting the mouth of a side street where shadows lie thick enough to hide more than cats. You've walked this path often enough to know which alleys will try to keep you. Today isn't the day to test them. Soon, the baths rise before you, massive and cracked, their entrance flanked by columns that seem to lean away from each other in mutual contempt. A thin line of patrons shuffles inside, clutching towels and bronze strigils. You follow, because even a city this indifferent must occasionally allow you to feel clean. Inside, the air turns heavy and forgiving. Steam curls around your ankles as if the building exhales in welcome. You strip with the rest of the crowd, tunics folding into hopeful piles, and step into the tepidarium. Warmth slides over your skin, loosening knots you didn't know you carried. You breathe deep, and the damp heat fills your chest like a second heartbeat. One mainstream fact: Roman baths were more than hygiene. They were centers of gossip, business, and political theater. Even emperors visited, though never without an entourage to remind everyone of their distance. Historians still argue whether the baths were democratic spaces or elaborate illusions of equality. You settle onto a bench where an older man scrapes oil from his arms with languid precision. He hums as he works, a tune you almost recognize, though you can't name it. Across the room, two women argue about a senator's latest decree. Their voices rise and fall, weaving around the splashes and murmurs like a chorus too tired to care if anyone listens. You close your eyes. For a moment, you pretend you're someone who can afford to linger, someone whose worries dissolve with the grime. It doesn't last, but it's enough. A fringe tidbit. Romans sometimes added crocodile dung to their bath oils, believing it softened skin. You'd laugh, but you once paid a man 3 denarii for a jar of ointment that turned out to be mashed beans, and a promise. You open your eyes and notice a boy hovering at the edge of the water, staring at you. His hair is cropped short, his tunic thin enough to show every rib. He doesn't speak, just watches, like he's trying to decide whether you're real. You nod. He doesn't nod back. Instead, he turns and slips away, leaving only the soft patter of wet feet on stone. You move to the caldarium, where the heat thickens until every breath tastes of minerals. You ease yourself into the water, biting back a groan as warmth crawls up your spine. Beside you, a man with scars like lightning bolts scrubs his chest with deliberate care. You meet his eye briefly. He inclines his head, respect or recognition, or maybe both. When you emerge, your skin feels raw and new, but your thoughts are unchanged. You dry off and dress in the same tunic that smells faintly of old sweat. A man at the doorway offers you a small cup of watered wine. You accept it without speaking. The sour tang jolts you back into the city's rhythm. You step into the street, again, blinking at the sudden clarity of daylight. Rome never waits for you to acclimate. It just resumes its noise, vendors hawking, dogs barking, the hammer of iron on iron. You cross toward a blacksmith's lane, drawn by the clangor that rises over the market chatter. Sparks leap in the gloom of the forge, each one a tiny confession of violence and necessity. Pause to watch a smith shape a blade, the metal glowing orange as he bends it to his will. The hammer falls again and again, steady as a heartbeat. Beside the forge, a boy no older than 12 pumps a bellows almost as tall as he is. His arms are wiry, marked by burns and calluses that speak of a life lived too close to heat. You catch his eye. He doesn't look away. You nod. He nods back. In Rome, that counts as intimacy. The smith lifts the blade, turning it so the firelight dances across the edge. A gladius, short, blunt, meant for close work. The kind of weapon that slips between ribs before you know you're bleeding. He quenches it in a trough with a hiss that sounds disturbingly like a sigh. You move on, weaving between piles of scrap and half-finished shields. A man leans against a post, chewing what might be fennel or might be something braver. He grins at you with blackened teeth. You grin back, because sometimes you have no choice but to match the city's grim humor. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were artisans or just another rung on the ladder of survival. You suspect the truth is that everyone in Rome was both, crafting and enduring in equal measure. You leave the lane behind, stepping into a quieter street where the air smells less of iron and more of old bread. A cart creaks past, loaded with amphorae, stamped with seals you don't recognize. The driver doesn't look up. No one ever does. You catch yourself scanning the shadows for Rhodogon, for the glint of her eyes or the hush of her voice. But she's not here. Not yet. You walk on, because Rome never stops, and neither do you. You turn onto a street that feels almost comfortable in its disrepair. The paving stones are cracked, but they're familiar under your feet, like the worn edges of an old coin. You drift past doorways where neighbors argue in voices pitched just below violence, past windows where curtains twitch and vanish as you pass. You don't pause. You've lived here long enough to know that curiosity is the first step toward regret. A boy crouches beside a wall, tracing lines in the dust with a stick. You glance down as you pass, expecting childish scribbles. But the shapes are careful, deliberate, circles within circles, punctuated by marks you don't recognize. You open your mouth to ask, but he doesn't look up. He just keeps drawing, as if the earth itself asked for these symbols, and he's merely obliging. Ahead, a cart groans under the weight of dyed linen. The driver strains to keep the load steady, sweat darkening the back of his tunic. You sidestep the wheels, but not quickly enough. A corner of fabric slaps your leg, leaving a smear of red pigment. You look down at the stain, somewhere between rust and accusation, and decide it suits you. You're wiping your hand on your belt when you smell it. Smoke, sharp and oily, rising over the murmur of the street. Your pulse skips. For a moment, you think it's just a cook fire left untended. But then you see the curling black ribbon above the rooftops. A few voices break into shouts. Someone runs. You follow without choosing to. You round the corner into chaos. A cart is ablaze, flames licking greedily up the sides, consuming the wheels in bright, hungry bites. The heat washes over you in a sudden wave, pulling sweat from your skin. You stop just outside the ring of gawkers, merchants, beggars, a pair of street boys already arguing over whether this counts as an omen. No one moves to help. Not really. Rome watches its disasters before it decides whether to intervene. You squint against the brightness, trying to see what's left inside the cart. Bolts of linen shriveling into ash, jars cracking in the heat. And then you see her. She stands at the far edge of the crowd, as still as if the fire has nothing to do with her. A girl, no older than 12, hair tangled around her face like a shroud. In her hand, a sliver of wood still smoldering at one end. Rhodogon. She meets your gaze across the distance, unblinking. The air around her wavers with the heat, but she doesn't flinch. You open your mouth, but the words die in your throat. Even if you could speak, you wouldn't know what to say. One mainstream fact. After the Great Fire of 64 CE, Rome rewrote its own story to blame convenient enemies. Christians, foreigners, anyone too powerless to protest. Historians still argue whether Nero watched the city burn for pleasure or simply saw opportunity in the ashes. Someone shouts for water. Another man fumbles with a bucket, sloshing more onto himself than the flames. You watch the girl lift her hand. For a heartbeat, you think she's going to wave. Instead, she opens her fingers, letting the charred stick tumble to the ground. It bounces once before settling into the dust. The fire doesn't care. It crackles higher, the cart sagging as the wheels give way. A sour smell billows out. Burning dates, maybe, or old wool. The crowd shifts back a step, unified by self-preservation. You take a step forward. Rhodogon doesn't move. She only watches you with that calm that feels older than the city itself. Then, as the cart collapses inward, she turns and disappears behind a mule cart piled with amphorae. You push through the edge of the crowd, ignoring the curses that follow. When you reach the spot where she stood, there's nothing. No footprints, no heat in the dust. Just the faint impression of absence. You look back at the burning cart, but the urgency has already begun to fade. A man beats at the flames with a length of cloth, and the crowd resumes its low, speculative murmurs. In Rome, every disaster is entertainment once it's no longer a threat. You step away, throat dry. The next street feels quieter, narrower, as if the buildings themselves lean closer to eavesdrop. You walk slowly, scanning every doorway. A woman huddles in a niche, rocking a baby you're not convinced is still breathing. You don't ask. You keep moving. At the end of the lane, a courtyard opens around you like an exhale. Ivy coils across a wall stained with soot. A fountain stands dry and cracked, its basin filled with windblown leaves and a single clay cup. You stop beside it, feeling the hush settle in your bones. Rhodogon is there. She sits on the rim of the fountain, legs swinging idly, her gaze fixed on a point past your shoulder. When you step closer, she doesn't look up. You stand in silence, feeling the city fade around you. Finally, she speaks. Her voice is low, matter of fact. You saw it. You nod. Why? She lifts her chin, eyes meeting yours. They look darker here, lit only by the gray daylight. Because forgetting costs more than remembering. You swallow. I don't understand. You will. She hops down, the motion so casual it feels unreal. She moves past you without touching, but you feel something, like the air shifts to make room for her memory. A fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed that when a child set fire to property, it was a sign from the lairs, the household spirits, that the family had failed them. You've never known whether to pity or envy people who can believe disasters are that tidy. Rhodogon stops a few paces away, turning to face you. You'll keep walking, she says. You'll keep asking. And you? Her mouth twitches in something like a smile. I'm not the answer. Then she's gone again, swallowed by the courtyard's cracked archway. You stand there a long moment, trying to decide whether you're following her or fleeing something else. The wind stirs the leaves in the fountain's basin. The clay cup tips on its side, rolling until it rests at your feet. You pick it up without knowing why. When you step out of the courtyard, Rome feels different, like you're seeing it through a film you didn't know was there. You close your eyes and take a breath. The memory is still warm in your hand. You leave the courtyard, and for a moment, you expect the street to look the same. It doesn't. The light feels too sharp, like Rome is squinting back at you. You walk slowly, aware of every detail. The way the stones slope toward the gutter, the torn awning that flaps like a tired banner, the smear of red pigment still drying on your sleeve. You cross a threshold you don't remember ever noticing. A low arch set into a wall that seems too old, even for this neighborhood. The lintel is carved with a pattern that stirs something in your gut, though you can't say why. The street behind you feels miles away. You step inside. The space beyond is small, no wider than your outstretched arms. A single window lets in a stripe of pale light that spills across the floor. Dust floats through the beam, each mote catching the glow like a tiny drifting lantern. On the far wall, a fresco clings to the plaster, faded colors showing a woman with a torch held high. Her eyes have been scratched out, either by time or by someone who wanted her to stop watching. Rhodagon sits beneath the fresco, knees drawn to her chest, hair veiling her face. You don't startle. You almost expected her. "You came," she says, not lifting her head. "I didn't know I was looking," you reply. You were. Her voice is quiet, but it fills the space like an echo that arrived before you. You move closer until you can see the outline of her jaw, the small scar at her temple. She looks up finally, and her eyes are the same dark, steady questions you've seen before. "You remember your brother?" she says. It's not a question. Yes. "Do you remember the day he left?" You close your eyes. You don't want to, but you do. The image comes easily. He stood at the edge of the Tiber docks, tunic too clean, eyes too bright. He gripped your shoulder and promised he'd come back with enough coin to buy you both out of the Subura. You believed him. That was the worst part. Rodigan watches you remember. "He thought Rome would honor the promise," she says softly. You nod. She unfolds her legs and stands. For a moment, she seems taller, older. Her hair shifts, and you glimpse something like a crown woven from thin branches. But when you blink, it's gone. "Come with me," she says. You hesitate. The room feels smaller now, the fresco's hollow eyes fixed on your spine. But you step forward. She leads you through a doorway into a passage that descends so gently you don't notice at first. The air cools by degrees. Your sandals scuff over worn steps, and your breath fogs in front of you. Ahead, a dim glow seeps around a bend. When you reach it, you stop. It's a chamber, round stone walls etched with hundreds of faces. Some serene, some contorted in agony, all worn nearly smooth. Between the faces, tiny masks dangle on leather cords. The air smells of old wax and something sweet you can't name. Rodigan steps into the center of the room. She turns, waiting. "What is this place?" you ask. "One of the archives," she says. "A place where memory doesn't need permission." You walk along the wall, studying the masks. Each one feels familiar in a way that tugs at something you'd rather leave buried. You stop at a small, delicate face with lips parted as if whispering. You don't touch it. One mainstream fact: Romans kept imagines, ancestral masks, to remind themselves of lineage and debt. Some families displayed them in proud processions. Others hid them away, ashamed of their origins. Historians still argue whether this practice was reverence or vanity, with better marketing. Rodigan gestures to a low bench in the center of the floor. You sit, because standing feels suddenly impossible. She kneels in front of you, her gaze level with yours. You asked why he died, she says. You nod. He believed the story more than he believed himself. What story? She lifts her hand, palm up. In it lies a coin, blackened and cracked, stamped with a face you almost recognize. She doesn't offer it. She just holds it, as if showing you is enough. This city was built on promises, she says. Most of them were lies. You swallow. The air feels heavier, as though every mask in the room has turned to listen. What am I supposed to do? You whisper. Rodigan closes her hand around the coin. Decide whether you'll be another stone in the wall or the crack that lets the light through. A fringe tidbit. Some whispered that Rome's secret cults believed the city itself was alive, a vast, invisible organism that consumed memory to sustain its power. You never believed such stories, until now. Rodigan rises and moves to a section of the wall you hadn't noticed before. She runs her hand over the stones, and a seam appears. A thin, perfect line that widens into a doorway. Beyond, darkness breathes. Will you follow? She asks. You look back at the chamber, the faces, the masks, the countless unspoken names. You think of your brother, of the last promise he made, of the way you still wake some mornings expecting him to walk through your door. You stand. I will, you say. Rodigan nods once, her expression unreadable. You step into the darkness together. The doorway seals itself behind you with a soft sound, less like stone moving and more like memory closing its hand. The darkness isn't total. As you walk, a faint luminescence emerges, lines etched into the floor, tracing a path ahead. Each step feels muffled, as if you're walking not on stone, but on the memory of it. The air is cool, tinged with something metallic. You breathe carefully, as if the wrong inhalation might break the spell, or reveal you as an intruder. Rodigan walks beside you, her footfalls soundless. You try not to look at her too often. Every time you do, you notice something new. Her hair shifting like it's underwater, her skin catching the dim light as though it's made of something older than flesh. You wonder if she even belongs to time in the way you do. You pass a shallow alcove where a row of masks hangs from iron hooks. These are different, larger, heavier, carved not to honor the dead, but to intimidate the living. You pause at one, its mouth stretched into a grin too wide to be kind. Rodigan stops beside you. The masks of judgment, she says. The ones the city wore when it needed to pretend justice mattered. You almost ask her how she knows these things, but you're afraid she might answer. You keep moving. The corridor ends in another doorway, this one unguarded by curtain or carving. It yawns open like a mouth, and you step inside before you can think better of it. The chamber is vast, round, domed, the ceiling disappearing into shadow. In the center stands a basin filled with liquid so dark it reflects nothing. You approach slowly, feeling your pulse thrum in your throat. Rodigan stands on the opposite side, her hands folded. This is the archive, she says, voice soft. The place where Rome keeps what it denies. You look down into the basin. The surface ripples once, then clears. A face stares up at you. Your brother's. Younger than you remember, his eyes bright with the certainty he could build a better life. The image shifts. A galley deck, a sand arena, the glint of a sword. You swallow. Is this real? One version of it, Rhodogon replies. The city doesn't allow just one truth. One mainstream fact. Roman law held that memory, memoria, was a civic duty. Funerary inscriptions, public statues, even graffiti ensured that no citizen disappeared without trace. But just as often, the Senate decreed damnatio memoriae, erasure of a name, a life, a story. Historians still argue whether such erasures succeeded or only made memory stronger. You reach out, your fingers trembling. The liquid shivers, but doesn't retreat. Instead, it draws you closer, as though the basin itself hungers for acknowledgement. You see more images, your mother's face, hollowed by grief, a soldier's hand gripping a gladius slick with blood, a senator leaning over a map of a city he doesn't love enough to save. Rhodogon speaks again. Every empire builds its power on stories it tells, and those it refuses to tell. You look up. What story am I in? The one that decides whether forgetting wins. A fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed the underworld was layered in chambers of memory, each more painful than the last. Only those willing to look into all of them could emerge free. You step back, wiping sweat from your lip. And if I walk away? Rhodogon's eyes glimmer. Then you'll live as most do, unbothered, unknowing. She doesn't say, unclaimed. You look around the chamber, at the walls engraved with shallow reliefs, scenes of conquest, sacrifice, civic pride. But the closer you look, the more each triumph seems brittle, each celebration hollow. Slowly, you circle the basin. On the far side, a narrow plinth rises waist-high. Upon it rests a single mask, carved from a wood so dark it absorbs the scant light. You recognize the curve of its brow, the line of its jaw. It's your brother's face. You can't move for a moment. The mask feels more alive than the memory in the basin. Rhodogon's voice comes to you as though from a great distance. If you put it on, you'll see what he saw, not what the Empire said. You swallow. Your hands curl into fists. You want to believe you're not the sort of person who would do this. But you are. You always have been. You lift the mask. It weighs more than you expect, as if every unanswered question has pressed itself into the grain. You hesitate, the edge brushing your fingertips. For a heartbeat, you consider dropping it back onto the plinth and walking away. Instead, you place it over your face. The chamber vanishes. You stand on a galley deck, wind tearing at your hair. The sky churns above, purple with storm. Men shout, oars heaving in desperate rhythm. You turn, and there he is, your brother. He doesn't see you. He's too busy gripping the railing, eyes locked on the horizon. Then he says something, words you can't hear over the roar of waves. But you see the shape of them. I thought this mattered. The mask burns against your skin. You flinch, but you don't pull away. The scene shifts. The arena now. Sand and blood, the crowd a hungry tide. Your brother kneels, sword planted in the earth. He looks up at you. No, not you. At someone behind you. His lips move again. This time, you hear it. Tell them I remembered. You tear the mask away. The chamber blurs back into focus. The basin, dark and silent. Rhodogon is watching. You understand now, she says. Your voice rasps when you speak. Never about victory. No, she agrees. It was about whose memory survives. You look at the mask in your hands. It feels lighter, almost kind. You place it back on the plinth. The basin ripples once, like something deep inside has exhaled. You stand straighter. You don't feel absolved, but you feel honest. And in Rome, that's rarer than any blessing. You leave the chamber without looking back. Maybe if you did, you'd see the basin settle into stillness again, or the masks turning to face the next pilgrim. Maybe you'd see nothing at all. It doesn't matter. Some moments you carry whether you witness their ending or not. Radagon walks ahead of you now, her steps measured. The corridor slopes upward, but the air stays cold enough that your breath smokes. You rub your palms together, feeling the damp chill where the mask touched your skin. You half expect the imprint to stay forever, a mark no one else will see, but everyone will sense. You emerge into a narrow lane, just wide enough for two people to pass without touching. Above you, balconies sag under clay pots brimming with herbs. The scent of crushed rosemary mingles with the older smells, oil, ash, and the faint undercurrent of fish that never quite leaves this city. Radagon stops at the mouth of the lane, letting you catch up. She doesn't look at you, only lifts her hand in a small gesture that could be greeting or warning. Then she steps aside, and you see where you are. The arena. Even half ruined, it dominates the block. Arches gaping, sand stained darker in some patches where no rain ever washed it clean. Ivy clings to the upper tiers, green filigree over old violence. You walk toward it without meaning to. Your feet seem to know the way. Inside, it's quieter than you expect. The echo of your steps blends with the sigh of wind through collapsed gates. You follow the curve of the outer hall, past shattered benches and discarded amphorae. Every few paces, a scrap of cloth or a broken strigil reminds you that no place ever empties entirely. At the entrance to the arena floor, you pause. A single shaft of light falls across the sand, picking out footprints too perfect to be recent. You know them. Even before you step forward, you know. Radagon doesn't follow you in. She waits in the passage, her silhouette framed by shadow. You glance back once, but she only nods. This part is yours. You walk to the center of the arena. The sand shifts under your soles, the way it must have shifted for him. You kneel, pressing your hand flat. The warmth of the day has sunk into the earth, and for a moment, it feels like a heartbeat under your palm. You close your eyes. You don't expect the vision, but it comes anyway. Your brother stands before you, not as a shade, but as he was. Younger than you, taller, the grin that always seemed too big for his face. He holds his gladius in one hand, the blade angled down in resignation, not readiness. He looks past you, as if watching a crowd you can't see. Then he lifts his eyes to yours. You hear his voice as clearly as if he were breathing beside you. Tell them I knew. You want to answer, but the vision dissolves before the words find you. You open your eyes to see only the sand again, flat, unremarkable. One mainstream fact: gladiatorial combat wasn't always a death sentence. Many fighters survived years in the arena, but the myth of noble sacrifice suited Rome better than the reality of men trading life for bread and applause. Historians still argue whether the games were sport, ritual, or simply a spectacle to distract the restless poor. You stand. The air feels thinner. You brush the sand from your hands, though it clings stubbornly. As you turn, you find Radagon waiting just inside the passage. You saw, she says. You nod. He knew, she repeats softly. That's all any of them ever wanted, to be seen, even in the end. You step past her into the tunnel. The light fades behind you. The path leads up again, winding through a part of the city you don't recognize. buildings lean together like old conspirators, their facades peeling to reveal older stone beneath. A child watches you from a doorway, a fig clasped in both hands. She doesn't speak. You nod, and she disappears inside. At the next corner, you find a street priest painting crude sigils onto a wall. He catches your eye and gestures with his brush. Blessing? You shake your head. He shrugs and goes back to his work. Rodigan stops beside you. Do you know why they paint these? Because it makes them feel safer? You guess. Her smile is faint. Because it makes them feel remembered. Even curses are a kind of acknowledgement. You walk on, passing stalls where vendors hawk charms carved from bone and clay tablets etched with prayers. One seller waves a pendant at you, a tiny bronze fist. For luck, he calls. You don't buy it. At the edge of the square, Rodigan points to an alley you've never noticed. You hesitate, then follow her through. The noise of the market vanishes behind you. The walls close in, painted with murals so old their colors bleed into each other. Women with torches, men in chains, children clutching masks. Every face is turned toward you as if they've been waiting for this moment. Rodigan stops before a door so low you have to duck to pass. She lays her hand flat against it. This is the place, she says. What place? The beginning, she whispers. A fringe tidbit. Some Roman mystery rites believed you had to retrace the steps of the dead, both literal and symbolic, before you could claim any truth. Deeper you walked, the more you surrendered. You touch the door beside her hand. The wood feels warm, pulsing gently beneath your palm. You can still leave, Rodigan says, voice almost kind. But you don't. You push the door open. Inside waits the dark. The dark doesn't feel empty. It feels patient, like something that has been waiting so long it doesn't bother pretending to be anything but itself. You step inside, and the door closes behind you without sound. A hush settles over your shoulders. For a moment, you wonder if this is what it feels like to stop existing in the ordinary sense. Then slowly, light begins to gather. Not from torches or lamps, just an ambient glow seeping from the stone itself. Shapes emerge, a circular chamber, the walls etched floor to ceiling with lines of script you can't read. The letters are so fine, they look stitched rather than carved. As you squint, they almost seem to shift under your gaze. Rodigan stands at the center, her hands folded. "Do you know where you are?" she asks. You shake your head. "This is the place where Rome writes what it fears," she says quietly, "and what it forgets." You step closer to the walls. The writing ripples gently, as if the stone breathes. When you run your fingers over the surface, the letters feel warm. You try to make sense of them, but the meaning eludes you, just beyond comprehension, like a word you almost remember. Rodigan watches you. "Most never come this far," she says. "They prefer to let the forgetting do its work." You turn. "Why me?" She tilts her head. "Because you hesitated." You open your mouth to ask what that means, but before you can, the floor beneath your feet shifts, not collapsing, just lowering, a slow descent deeper into something that isn't quite earth. You glance down. The stone steps spiral away, carrying you and Rodigan in a gentle rotation. The chamber above recedes until it is just a halo of pale light. Finally, you stop. A corridor stretches ahead, lined with alcoves. In each recess stands a figure, motionless, cloaked, their faces hidden behind smooth masks. You step closer to the nearest and realize the mask is not blank. It is simply too intricate for your eyes to resolve. Patterns shift across its surface in a slow dance. Rodigan's voice is almost a whisper. The witnesses. You look at her. They remember, she explains. That's all they do. They stand here and hold the parts no one else will carry. You turn back to the masked figure. Are they alive? She doesn't answer. Or perhaps the answer is obvious. One mainstream fact: in the rites of certain Roman mystery cults, initiates were sworn to silence by being brought before effigies of the witnesses, figures who embodied the cost of knowledge. Historians still argue whether these were symbolic or literal records of those who failed to keep their vows. You walk past the alcoves, your footsteps hushed on the smooth stone. Each witness seems to lean forward a fraction, as if they sense you're passing. You resist the urge to reach out and touch them. At the end of the passage, a wide arch opens into another chamber. This one is smaller, circular, with a pedestal in the center. Upon it rests a single object, a ring, wrought of blackened iron twisted into a shape that defies symmetry. It hums, faint and insistent, like a sound you feel more than hear. Rodigan gestures. This is what you came for. You hesitate. I don't even know what it is. She studies you, her eyes dark as wet earth. It's the truth that never fit into any inscription, she says. The story Rome told itself so many times it began to believe it, even when it wasn't true. You swallow. And if I take it? Then you carry it, she says simply, until you decide what to do with it. A fringe tidbit. Some Roman philosophers believed certain objects could become vessels of collective memory. A ring, a blade, a mask, each absorbing the weight of all who held it before. To wear such an object was to inherit not just memory, but responsibility. You step closer to the pedestal. The ring vibrates under your gaze, as if sensing your presence. You reach out, your hand steady, despite the tremor in your chest. When your fingers close around the iron, it is warm, almost alive. The moment you lift it, the witnesses stir, not by moving, by noticing. You feel their attention, a collective regard that tightens the air around you. For an instant, you glimpse your brother, kneeling in the arena, eyes raised to a sky that refused to answer. You see Rodigan standing beside him, her expression unchanged. You turn to her now, the ring clutched in your palm. What happens if I can't carry it? Rodigan steps forward until her face is inches from yours. Then you put it down, she says softly, and Rome continues exactly as it always has. The idea chills you more than any threat. You slide the ring onto your finger. It fits perfectly. The air in the chamber softens. The witnesses seem to lean back, their attention receding. You exhale shakily, surprised to find you're still standing. Rodigan smiles, though the sadness in it is unmistakable. It's done. No, you say. It's started. You walk past her, out of the chamber and into a corridor that slopes upward. Each step feels different now, heavier and lighter all at once. The dark recedes behind you, and ahead you see daylight. Not the filtered glow of a hidden courtyard, but the true daylight of the city above. The sky Rome pretends is eternal. You step into it, and it feels, impossibly, like waking up. The daylight doesn't welcome you. It interrogates you, bright and unblinking, as though Rome itself is checking to see if you've changed. You stand at the mouth of a street you've walked 100 times, but today, It feels stranger than any hidden chamber. Your hand closes around the ring on your finger. It doesn't burn, but it hums, a reminder you haven't left everything in the dark. You draw a breath, steadying yourself before stepping forward. The square you enter is wide, framed by cracked columns and stalls arranged like a haphazard prayer. Vendors shout over each other, fishmongers and fortune sellers and boys waving handfuls of wilted herbs. A woman balances a basket on her hip, her gaze drifting past you as though you're already a ghost. You weave through the crowd, every sensation sharpened by what you carry. You see the grime layered on the marble facades, smell the sour rot beneath fresh-cut flowers, hear the hollow ring of laughter that ends too abruptly. Every mask the city wears is visible now. You stop before a shrine built into the corner of a shop. A small idol of Mercury grins down, one hand raised in an eternal bargain. A single coin rests in the dish at his feet. You study the inscription beneath his sandals, letters half erased by rain and fingers. Rodigan steps out of the shifting crowd as if she's always been there. "What do you see?" she asks. "That no one ever really forgets," you say. She tilts her head. "And that frightens you?" "It should," you admit. "But it doesn't?" Her eyes glimmer, the same ancient calm you saw in the darkness. "Then you're ready." One mainstream fact. Public shrines in Rome were less about devotion than about transaction. You gave an offering so Mercury or Jupiter or whichever god was nearest might look the other way when you lied, cheated, or survived. Historians still argue whether these bargains made Rome strong or hollow. You move on, your feet finding the path that loops toward the river. The closer you get, the cooler the air becomes. The Tiber doesn't care about your revelations. It flows the way it always has, lazy, silt-laden, and indifferent. When you reach the embankment, you stop. The water glints between the moored barges, gold and gray and brown in layers. Men shout as they unload crates. A child dangles a rope in the current, hoping for a fish that never comes. You remember your brother here? Young, eyes bright with plans he thought he could wrestle into submission. You remember promising you'd be here when he returned. Rodigan steps to your side. "This is where he left," she says. "Yes. And where he was always going to leave," she adds softly. You swallow. The ring tightens around your finger, then eases again. Almost like a heartbeat, a fringe tidbit. In the early Republic, the Tiber was sacred, believed to be watched by a river god who accepted offerings in exchange for safe passage. By the Empire, the river was mostly a utility, a sewer, a trade route, a grave. Rome's memory is selective even about its devotions. You look at Rodigan. "What do I do now?" "You walk," she says. "You remember. You let the remembering change you." "And if I fail?" She looks past you to the river. "Then you start over." The wind rises off the water, carrying the smell of fish and old mud. You close your eyes and let it wash over you, feeling the city breathing around you, restless, ancient, never satisfied. When you open your eyes, you see a woman further down the quay, crouched over a basket of broken pottery. She's arranging the shards in patterns, lines, circles, spirals. No one pays her any attention. You think of the basin in the archive, the way memory coiled and struck if you looked too long. You turn away, retracing your steps up the slope toward the temple district. The climb feels longer than it should, every footstep dragging a tether of unseen weight. At the crest, you pause before the Temple of Vesta. The eternal flame burns within, flickering in a draft you can't feel. A Vestal virgin stands at the threshold, her gaze fixed on you. "You carry something," she says, not accusing, not curious, just acknowledging. "Yes, be careful," she murmurs. "Rome has a habit of burying those who remember too clearly." You nod. She turns back to her vigil, and you continue past her. The colonnade ahead offers a scrap of shade. You lean against the nearest pillar, letting the carved flutes press into your spine. From here, you can see the forum laid out below, a jumble of monuments and marble illusions. Statues pose in defiance of time. You know better now. Nothing is immune to forgetting. Rodigon steps into view again, framed by the arch that leads down. "You aren't finished," she says. "I didn't expect to be." She gestures to the forum. "This is where the lie began. And where it ends? That," she says, "is what you're here to decide." One mainstream fact: when the Senate met in the Curia, they did so surrounded by statues of ancestors and gods, reminders of obligation. But in time, the statues became decorations, the rituals empty. Historians still argue whether Rome fell because it stopped believing in itself, or because it believed too much. You watch her, feeling the ring warm again. "What will happen if I name the truth?" Rodigan's expression doesn't change. "Something old will wake up," she says, "and decide whether to forgive us." The wind shifts, rattling a line of votive lamps along the colonnade. A flame gutters, then steadies. You straighten, drawing in a slow breath. "All right," you say. "Then come," Rodigon whispers. You walk beside her, past the columns, toward the heart of the city, toward whatever comes next. The forum doesn't look different. That's the cruel part. It still sprawls beneath the sun like a theater between acts. Columns standing in rows like bored spectators, paving stones worn smooth by ambition. You walk its edge with Rodigon at your side, every step pulling you deeper into the place where stories masquerade as fact. Voices drift across the square, traders haggling over grain, a magistrate rehearsing a speech no one wants to hear, a girl singing a lullaby to a dog that doesn't belong to her. You keep moving. If you stop now, you'll start believing this is all there is. The market, the rituals, the polite illusions. You pass the rostra, the speaker's platform crusted in dried wax from 100 ceremonial candles. Someone has carved a name into its base, letters shallow and hurried. You don't recognize it, but the act itself feels familiar. Proof that someone, somewhere, refused to be erased. Rodigon pauses at the base of a flight of stairs leading into the Curia Julia, the Senate House. You've never been inside. Few are invited, and fewer emerge unchanged. She looks at you, her expression unreadable. "Are you ready to see what they built on your brother's bones?" "I don't think I am," you admit. "That's an honest place to start," she says softly. You climb the steps, your palm brushing the grooves in the railing, deep indentations worn by centuries of hands no more certain than yours. The doors stand open, though no guard announces your arrival. Perhaps no guard would dare. Inside, the air is different, still, close, heavy with a sweetness that doesn't belong. Your sandals echo across the patterned floor. The chamber is lined with tiers of marble benches, empty now, but for shadows that cling in the corners. At the far end, a dais rises. A single chair waits, carved from wood so dark it seems to absorb light. Above it, the painted ceiling is a riot of symbols: eagles, laurels, flames, 100 stories pretending to be truth. Rodigan stops a few paces behind you. "This is where the lie sat." she says, where it smiled and gave orders. You step closer to the dais. A chill ripples across your shoulders. For a moment, you almost hear the rustle of togas, the scrape of styluses on wax. One mainstream fact: the Senate survived countless purges and reforms by pretending continuity. Every new emperor swore to respect its dignity, even as he stripped its power. Historians still argue whether the Senate's persistence was resilience or cowardice disguised as tradition. You reach up to touch the back of the chair. Your fingers stop an inch away, as if an unseen hand holds them back. Rodigan watches you carefully. You don't have to sit. You look at her, your throat dry. Then why did we come? She doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. You lower your hand. The ring on your finger throbs once, a slow, pulsing ache that travels up your arm. You brace yourself, but the sensation doesn't fade. Instead, the shadows on the benches shift. At first, you think it's a trick of the light, dust and drafts conspiring to unsettle you. But then they grow thicker, coalescing into forms. Not people, impressions, echoes of presence. You sense them watching you, curious or wary or simply resigned. Rodigan lifts her chin. You asked for the truth, she says. This is the cost. You step back. The forms sharpen. Half-seen outlines draped in senators' robes, their faces obscured by masks of pale, unfinished wood. One raises a hand in silent greeting. Another inclines its head. No one speaks. The silence is heavier than any accusation. The ring grows warmer. You look down and see fine cracks spreading across its surface, light seeping from within like a lantern covered too long. What happens now? You whisper. Rodigan's eyes meet yours. You name it. Name what? The lie, she says simply. A fringe tidbit. Some Roman augurs claimed the future could be changed if a single witness spoke the truth aloud in a place consecrated to power. Others called this superstition, an excuse to blame prophecy when politics failed. You swallow, feeling the sweat on your neck cool in the draft that circles the chamber. The lie, you say, your voice rough. That loyalty was owed. That sacrifice would be honored. That dying for Rome meant something more than convenience. A breath moves through the shadows, as if they all exhaled together. The ring on your finger fractures, splitting into halves that tumble to the floor without sound. A hush swallows the room, so complete it feels like the world itself paused to listen. The figures remain silent, but you feel something shift. Not forgiveness, not condemnation, just acknowledgement. You step away from the dais. The air lightens, though your body feels heavier, every bone aware of what you've just carried into daylight. Rodigan lifts her hand. It's time to leave. You hesitate. That's it? For now, she says. The rest comes later. You follow her out of the chamber, blinking as the brightness of afternoon slams into your eyes. The forum stretches before you, unchanged to everyone who didn't stand in that room. Children race across the paving stones, their laughter bright and aimless. A woman sweeps the steps of a temple, flicking breadcrumbs into the wind. Two men argue over the price of a jug. All of it looks the same, but you are not. You descend the Senate steps slowly, feeling each riser under your heels as if it's judging you. The sunlight blurs your vision, but you don't lift a hand to shield your eyes. You want to see this place exactly as it is. No illusions, no borrowed grandeur. At the bottom, Rodigan waits. Her gaze doesn't linger on your face. Instead, she watches the people milling across the forum. Mothers and moneylenders, priests, and pickpockets. "What did they say to you?" you ask. She lifts one shoulder. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "The truth doesn't need words," she murmurs. The crowd parts around you as you walk, as if they sense you've brought something back that doesn't belong among ordinary errands. You feel raw, like every thought is an exposed nerve. A boy darts across your path, a length of rope coiled in his hands. He pauses, staring at you with round, solemn eyes. Before you can speak, he lifts the rope as if in salute, then disappears into the tangle of bodies. Rodigan's expression softens. "You saw it, didn't you? That it was never about law or glory. It was about forgetting," you say. She inclines her head. "And who benefits when memory fails?" You turn down a narrow lane that skirts the edge of the forum. The walls here are older, their bricks darker where rain can't reach. Names are carved into every surface, some recent, some so worn they look like scars. You run your fingers over them as you pass. One mainstream fact: Roman graffiti wasn't always vulgar. Sometimes it was simply a name, proof that someone existed, if only for a day. Historians still argue whether these markings were desperate acts of self-assertion or the first graffiti manifestos. At the end of the lane stands a small shrine. You don't recognize the god. Its features are smooth, undefined, just a suggestion of a face above a slab of offerings. A single almond, a wax tablet, a child's sandal. Rodigan stops, resting her palm against the base of the idol. "This is where the stories came to rest when no temple would house them," she says. You kneel beside her, feeling the ground cool through your tunic. "Do you think they remember?" She doesn't answer right away. The silence stretches, deep and unhurried. Finally, she whispers, "They don't forget. They wait." You look up at the faceless stone. "For what?" "For someone to speak their names," she says. You reach out and lay your hand beside hers. The stone is cold, but your skin prickles with a warmth that doesn't belong to you. A fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed the earliest gods had no shapes, no voices, only presence. When temples began to give them faces, they also gave them limits. You wonder what this god looked like before it was trapped in stone. Rodigan rises first. Her eyes gleam, but there's no triumph in them, only recognition. "There's one more place," she says. You stand, your legs unsteady. "Where?" "Where the first lie was told." She doesn't wait for you to answer. She turns and walks, her pace unhurried. You follow, past the edge of the forum, and into the deeper, older avenues where daylight seems reluctant to follow. You pass under an arch carved with scenes of conquest. Legions trampling enemies, eagles held aloft, laurels crowning faceless victors. You pause beneath it. The reliefs seem smaller than they did when you were a child, less convincing. Rodigan slows to let you catch up. "The lie was simple," she says. "That conquest was destiny. That empire was inevitable. And people believed it," you say. "They still do." You step beyond the arch. The road narrows until you must walk single file. On either side, buildings lean so close you can hear the creak of old timber settling. A line of laundry flutters overhead, tunics faded to the color of tired bone. At the end of the alley, a door stands ajar. No markings, no sign, only the hush that seems to pool around places no one wants to admit exist. Rodigan gestures. Inside. You don't ask what you'll find. You've learned the question never matters as much as the willingness to step forward. You push the door open. The chamber is small, its ceiling low enough to make you bow your head. A single table stands in the center, and upon it rests a mask carved from pale wood. Unlike the others, this one has no expression at all, no smile, no sorrow, just emptiness. Rodigan's voice is quiet. They wore this when they decreed which names would be remembered. Who are they? The First Senate, she says. The men who decided memory was a tool. You step closer to the table. The mask is smooth beneath your fingertips, the grain fine as silk. It doesn't vibrate or warm or hum. It just waits. Do you want me to wear it? You ask. No, Rodigan replies. I want you to look into it. You lift the mask, angling it so the light catches the hollow where eyes should be. And in that emptiness, you see a reflection, not of yourself, but of the city. The streets, the temples, the alleys, the faces of the forgotten, the voices of the unacknowledged, and over all of it, the stories, layered and layered until the truth is just another foundation stone. You lower the mask. Rodigan watches you. Now you know. You exhale, and it feels like something you've carried all your life leaves you in that breath. Is it enough? You ask. Her smile is gentle. It's a beginning. You set the mask back on the table. The silence that follows feels different, less accusatory, more like acceptance. When you turn to the door, the sun slants through the opening in a single clean beam. You step into it, blinking. Rome waits, and you are ready to meet it on its own terms. Outside the doorway, the street greets you with the same careless noise as before. Vendors hawking dates, a donkey braying somewhere around the corner, the hush of sandals sliding over stone. But you hear it all differently now. It's not just a marketplace. It's an archive with no shelves. 1,000 small stories being traded and abandoned with every step. Rodigan doesn't walk ahead this time. She moves beside you, shoulder to shoulder. The air feels heavier the farther you go, like you're moving through water no one else notices. At the end of the street, you come to a small square, ringed by columns too battered to name the gods they once honored. In the center stands a tree. Black bark, bare branches twisted into a shape that might be pleading or might be triumphant. It's the tree you saw in visions, though you never believed it could exist anywhere but your mind. You step closer, unable to help yourself. Every branch is carved with names, some shallow and clumsy, others etched with such care they look like they might bleed. You run your fingertips across the nearest inscription. The letters are rough. The story behind them is unknowable. Rodigan stops just behind you. This is where the unrecorded ended, she says softly, and where the empire pretended it had never begun. You look back at her. Who planted it? No one remembers, she says, but everyone knew it was here. You tilt your head, studying the bark. Something about it feels familiar, like the grain in the mask or the ring's fractured surface, as if all these objects are pieces of the same forgotten language. One mainstream fact: Roman law decreed certain trees sacred, boundary markers, witnesses to treaties. But sometimes, an ordinary tree became sacred simply because enough people decided it was. Historians still argue whether this made those trees relics or just convenient symbols. You step around to the other side, where the names grow denser. Each one is a refusal to disappear. Each one is proof that memory is never tidy. Rodigan places her hand flat against the trunk. There's something here you should see. You watch her fingers trace a spiral near the roots. The bark softens under her touch, folding open like a door you didn't see. Beneath it is a hollow, barely wide enough to fit your hand. You don't have to, he murmurs, but you know you do. You reach inside. The air in the hollow is cold and damp, as if the tree has swallowed centuries of winter. Your fingers close around something hard, and you draw it out. A shard of blackened clay, etched with the same spiral you saw her trace. You turn it over. On the back, a word is scratched in a script older than Latin. You can't read it, but when you look up at Rodigan, she nods. It's your name, she says. No, you whisper. It isn't. It's the name you were given the moment you began to remember. He corrects. The part of you Rome doesn't own. A fringe tidbit. Some Roman mystery cults believed every soul had two names, one given at birth, one revealed by ordeal. Only the second could not be stolen or erased. You close your fist around the shard. For an instant, you feel the weight of every other name carved into this tree, every plea to remain visible. It doesn't crush you, it steadies you. Rodigan's eyes meet yours. What will you do with it? I don't know yet. Good, she says. That means you still have a choice. You step back from the tree, careful not to disturb the spiral door as it closes. The bark seals itself with a finality you don't try to question. The square is empty now, though you didn't see anyone leave. The hush that settles is not threatening. It feels like respect. You slip the shard into the fold of your belt. It's heavier than it should be. Or maybe you are simply more aware of what you carry. Rodigan walks to your side. This isn't the end, she says. It never is. She smiles faintly. That's the first lesson. You cross the square together, passing beneath the leaning columns. As you step beyond their shadows, the sunlight blooms across your face. You pause, blinking into the brightness. Beyond this place, Rome stretches in every direction. Alleys that lead into centuries of forgetting, streets where laughter and sorrow have always shared space. You understand, in a way you couldn't before, that you are not a witness alone. You are a participant. Rodigan touches your arm lightly. There's one more place, she says. Another shrine? You ask. She shakes her head. The place where the Empire learned to lie. You don't ask what she means. The answer waits, like everything else, in the act of walking. One mainstream fact. The Roman Forum once housed the earliest records of the Republic. Laws engraved on bronze tablets. But over time, the tablets were replaced by parchments that could be amended, lost, or burned. Historians still argue whether this was progress or surrender. You start walking again, every footstep a promise that you will not look away. You don't glance back at the tree. You already know it will be there, long after every empire forgets why it was afraid. The streets you walk now are older than any road marked on a map. The stones under your feet are polished by generations of sandals and ambition. You feel them through the soles of your shoes. Each step a conversation with countless lives that passed this way before you. Rodigan guides you without hurrying. The alleys twist and narrow, and you realize they're descending. Gradually, Rome folds itself down around you, the sky shrinking to a jagged ribbon overhead. You pass doorways draped in faded curtains, niches holding cracked statues, walls painted with fragments of prayers. No one else is here. Or if they they've learned how to remain unseen. At the end of the last slope, you reach an arch so weathered you wouldn't have recognized it as a threshold. Radagon places her palm against the keystone. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a shudder passes through the stone, and the wall slides aside. A hush rushes out, cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of old parchment. You step across the threshold. The air changes, thicker, expectant. Beyond is a chamber unlike any you've entered. It is neither temple nor cellar. The walls rise in perfect circles, each level lined with shelves. No scrolls rest on them. No tablets. Only masks. Hundreds of them, each carved in a different face. Some contorted in grief, some serene, some half-finished, as if their stories were interrupted. Radagon's voice is soft. This is the archive of the unsaid. You turn in a slow circle, taking in the scale. The masks do not seem dead. They seem to be watching you in the polite, unblinking way of those who've waited too long to be acknowledged. What are they? You whisper. One mask for every vow unspoken, every betrayal unrecorded, every moment too dangerous to be written down, she says. You step closer to the lowest shelf. The nearest mask is small, child-sized, the mouth parted in a question it never finished asking. Your hand hovers over it, but you don't touch it. One mainstream fact. Romans were meticulous record keepers, but the annals of the Senate, the personal diaries of emperors, and the acts of generals all went missing, at intervals suspiciously convenient. Historians still argue whether these losses were incompetence or deliberate amnesia. Radagon moves past you, deeper into the archive. Follow me, she says. You walk among the shelves. The silence is so complete that your breathing sounds too loud. Every few paces, you glimpse a mask that feels familiar, though you can't say why. Perhaps memory is older than recognition. In the center of the chamber, a pedestal rises waist-high. Upon it sits a single object, a tablet of dark clay, no larger than your palm. Its surface is unmarked, except for one line of script, so fine it looks scratched by a needle. Radagon doesn't touch it. This, she says, is the first record of the first lie. You study the tablet. The writing means nothing to you, but it stirs something in your gut, a recognition you wish you could deny. What does it say? Radagon glances at you, her eyes almost gentle. That Rome was destined. You swallow. And it wasn't? It was chosen, she murmurs, and when choice felt too fragile, they called it destiny. A fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe the earliest Roman myths were borrowed from Etruscan legends, altered to fit a narrative of inevitability. In the end, no one knew where the stories started, only where they were most useful. You lift your hand. This time, you do touch the tablet. It's warmer than you expect, as if countless hands have held it before yours. Nothing happens at first. Then, slowly, the masks begin to hum. The sound is low, almost a vibration more than a tone. It resonates in your chest, in your teeth, in the marrow of your bones. Radagon doesn't look afraid. She closes her eyes. They remember, she says. What do they remember? You ask. That destiny was the first story told to keep a city from admitting it was afraid. The hum grows louder. You feel it pressing against your ribs, urging you to say something, to acknowledge what you already know. Take a breath. I don't believe in destiny. The hum stops, not fades, stops. The silence that follows is deeper than before, as if the masks have finally exhaled. Radagon opens her eyes. That's all they needed. she says. You step back from the pedestal. The tablet doesn't glow or crack. It just sits there, unimpressed, unchanged. Maybe that's the point. The lie doesn't vanish because you name it, but you do. You look around the chamber. For the first time, the masks don't feel accusatory. They feel relieved. Rodigan touches your shoulder. It's time. Time for what? To walk out of here with the truth you've chosen, she says. One mainstream fact. The Roman practice of damnatio memoriae, the erasure of a name from all records, never fully succeeded. Even the condemned were remembered in whispers, in curses, in the stubborn refusal to forget. You nod. The tablet stays where it is. You leave it behind, knowing that it will wait for the next person brave or foolish enough to touch it. At the doorway, Rodigan turns to look back one last time. Her expression is unreadable. Will you come back? You ask. Perhaps, she says, if you need me. The doorway opens to daylight again. You step into it, and this time, the sun feels like something you earned. Outside, the sky has shifted. The color is richer, deeper blue, laced with the first hints of dusk. You stand there blinking, your eyes adjusting to a world that looks the same, but feels profoundly altered. Rodigan doesn't speak. She waits, patient as ever. You realize she's never hurried you, not once. Every question, every hesitation. She met them with a calm of someone who's watched 1,000 lives circle the same truths. You walk forward, past the threshold where the archive lies hidden beneath the cobbles. You don't look back. Some places are meant to be left behind while they continue their quiet work. The street is wider here. Market stalls cluster along one side, their canopies drooping under the weight of figs and dates, old cloth, cracked pottery. A man stands behind a table covered in cheap charms, glass beads, faded coins, carved bits of bone. As you pass, he lifts a hand. For protection, he calls, holding up a small pendant shaped like a flame. You shake your head. Rodigan tilts her chin toward the baubles. Do you know why they sell these? To feel safe? To feel remembered, she says. Even the smallest token is a promise that someone will know you were here. One mainstream fact. Roman households often kept small household gods, lares and penates, on shelves near the kitchen. Offerings of bread or wine were a way to make the invisible feel present. Historians still argue whether these rituals were faith or habit. You keep moving, the ring finger of your right hand tingling where the iron band used to be. You wonder if you'll ever stop feeling its weight. As you turn the next corner, a familiar building rises before you. The arena. The same arches, the same ivy clinging to its walls. But today, the facade seems thinner, as though you could walk straight through it and find not stone but memory. Rodigan stops beside you. You knew you'd end here. You nod. A man sweeps the steps. His broom scratches a steady rhythm against the marble, a counterpoint to the muffled roar of the city beyond. You step past him, into the shadowed corridor that leads to the arena floor. You walk slowly, touching the walls as you go. You remember every story you've ever heard about this place. Gladiators with borrowed names, beasts dragged in from the ends of the empire, crowds cheering for a violence they pretended was noble. You step out into the arena itself. The sand is smooth, raked into careful circles no one will notice once the fighting starts again. But tonight, it's empty, silent. Rodigan stands behind you. You can feel her presence without turning. He died here, you say. Yes. And what did it buy? She doesn't answer. You kneel. The sand shifts beneath your weight, giving way like water. You press your palm flat until the grains crawl into the lines of your skin. A fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed that sand from the arena was sacred, charged with the final breaths of the fallen. It was sometimes gathered in jars and kept as a talisman against cowardice. You stand. The sun has fallen just far enough that the upper tiers are in shadow. Only the center circle glows. One last gesture of theater from a city addicted to spectacle. Rodigan steps to your side. There's something you should see. She gestures to a narrow arch on the far side. You've never noticed it before. The darkness within feels deeper than shadow. You cross the sand, every step louder than the last. As you pass under the arch, the air cools instantly. Your breath fogs. Inside is a chamber carved into the foundation of the arena itself. Low ceiling, rough walls. A single stone chair stands at the center, as unadorned as a tomb. Rodigan doesn't follow you in. She waits at the threshold. You approach the chair. On the seat rests an object you didn't expect. A gladius, its blade dulled by time, its hilt wrapped in faded leather. You reach for it. The moment your hand closes around the grip, you understand. This isn't a weapon. It's a witness. You lift it, and you see your brother kneeling in the sand, the crowd roaring, the lion circling. But behind all that, something else. Someone standing at the edge of the arena, face hidden, one hand raised in silent command. You can't see who it is. The vision fades. You look back at Rodigan. Her face is solemn. Even in the end, he wasn't alone. Who was it? You whisper. Someone who believed the lie was worth everything, she says. You place the gladius back on the stone chair. The air in the chamber eases, as if some old story has finally exhaled. One mainstream fact. When a gladiator died, his weapons were often passed to the next recruit. An unspoken reminder that no man was irreplaceable. You walk out of the chamber. The arena floor looks different. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You see every footprint, every bloodstain, every place where the sand was smoothed to hide what happened. Rodigan meets your gaze. It's time. For what? To decide what you will remember, she says. You close your eyes. For a moment, you feel the darkness pressing in, inviting you to forget, to let the story end. But you open them again, and you walk back into the light. Outside the arena, twilight has gathered itself into a kind of hush. You feel it on your skin, the way the temperature dips, the way the shadows grow long enough to slip under every door. Rodigan waits by the archway. She doesn't look impatient. She never has. Her presence is the same steady gravity it's been since you first saw her. You join her on the steps. Together, you watch the last daylight fade over the rooftops. The city looks peaceful from here, as if it might finally be resting. But you know better. You start walking. The streets are nearly empty. A boy chases a hoop that rattles against the stones. A woman latches her shutters one by one. A stray dog noses at the base of a statue. You pass a fountain where someone has left a cracked jug. Water trickles over the lip, catching the last scraps of light. You pause, brushing your fingertips through the stream. It's cold enough to bite. Rodigan stands a little apart, watching you without comment. What happens now? You ask. She tilts her head. Now you walk to the place Rome pretends doesn't exist. Where is that? Her smile is small, where all things end. You leave the fountain behind, the water still whispering in the darkness. The road you follow is unfamiliar. It curves through a district where the houses lean together as if conspiring. No lamps burn in the windows. The silence here feels dense, as if every sound would be swallowed before it reached your ears. At the end of the street stands a gate. Not a triumphal arch or a temple door, just a plain slab of stone set upright in the road. Someone has carved a single line across it, but the words are too worn to read. Radagon lays her palm against the stone. It doesn't move. It simply softens, the surface flowing aside like warm wax. A passage opens. You look at her, waiting for an explanation. She doesn't offer one, so you step through. The space beyond is neither room nor tunnel. It is a cavity in the city's foundation, wider than any hall, its ceiling lost in darkness. The floor under your feet is polished smooth. When you look down, you see faint reflections of yourself walking. Radagon follows you in. In the distance, a glow pulses, dim, steady, like the heartbeat of something vast and old. You walk toward it without being told. As you approach, you see the source. A tree stands here, roots spreading across the stone, branches lifted in frozen supplication. But unlike the black tree in the square, this one is made entirely of glass. Every limb is hollow, and within each branch flows a thin trickle of light, gold and red and white. You circle it slowly. In the shifting currents of brightness, you glimpse faces, some familiar, some not. You see your brother. You see Radagon. You see yourself, younger and unscarred by knowledge. One mainstream fact: Romans believed in the mundus, a pit believed to be a gate to the underworld. Rituals were performed to open it 3 times a year, allowing the spirits of the dead to speak. Historians still argue whether it was truly a place or just an idea given form. Radagon doesn't move. Her voice is softer than you've ever heard it. This is the memory Rome can't destroy. What is it? The record of everything it tried to bury, she says. Every name, every story. You lift a hand. The glass closest to your fingers warms. Inside the branch, the stream of light brightens, briefly illuminating a scene you know too well. The arena, the sand, the last breath. You lower your hand. Radagon steps beside you. Do you understand now? That no lie lasts forever, you say. She nods. A fringe tidbit. Some mystery cults whispered that the soul was a mirror, reflecting the true history of the world. If you dared to look long enough, you would see, not just yourself, the pattern of every life entwined with yours. You watch the light flow through the glass. For the first time, you feel no urgency to speak. The silence is not oppressive here. It is a shelter. Radagon turns to you. It's time to choose. Choose what? What you will carry back, she says. You look down at your hands. They are empty, but you can still feel the ring that once circled your finger. You can feel the imprint of the tablet, the weight of the gladius, cold hush of the masks. I don't know what to take, you admit. You already have, she whispers. The light within the tree pulses, as if agreeing. You step back. The air shifts around you, cooler, clearer. You realize you are not afraid. Radagon watches you a moment longer. Then she turns, walking toward the place where the darkness gives way to a narrow line of dawn. You follow her. And as you leave the chamber behind, the glow of the glass branches lingers in your mind, softer than any memory. more enduring than any empire. You step out into the earliest dawn you can remember, pale gold seeping across the rooftops, lighting the crooked eaves and broken cornices with a soft, almost apologetic glow. The sky is a color you don't have a name for, something between memory and surrender. It feels like the city is offering you this moment, a truce, before it starts shouting again. Rhodagon stands a few steps ahead. In this new light, she doesn't look like a phantom or a guide. She looks human, tired, resolute, someone who's watched too many people promise to remember and then choose to forget. You join her without speaking. Together, you walk down a slope where the cobbles have been worn concave by centuries of feet, where every depression feels like the imprint of someone who stood here, uncertain. The breeze tastes different at this hour. Cooler, sharper. You think of the archives, the masks, the glass tree with light in its veins. You think of how none of it was truly hidden, just waiting for someone stubborn enough to keep walking. You turn into a lane so narrow your shoulders brush the walls. A cat slips past your ankles, trailing a smell of dust and warm stone. At the end of the alley, the passage opens into a courtyard you've never noticed. In the center stands a single pillar, cracked and leaning. Around its base, names are etched over each other until they form a kind of palimpsest. No one inscription fully legible, everyone refusing to be erased. Rodigan stops beside the pillar, resting her hand lightly against the cold surface. "This is where the first witness stood," she says. "Witness to what?" To the moment Rome decided it needed a story grand enough to excuse everything that came after. You walk around the pillar, fingertips grazing the chiseled names. One feels familiar under your touch. You can't read it, but your pulse responds anyway. One mainstream fact. Many scholars agree that the Roman practice of myth-making, linking the city's foundation to heroes like Aeneas, was a deliberate strategy to unite fractious tribes under a single, manufactured identity. Historians still argue whether this was propaganda or simply human nature insisting on purpose. Rhodagon kneels, tracing the lowest etchings with her thumb. "They thought carving names here would protect them," she murmurs, "from obscurity, from shame." You crouch beside her. "Did it work?" She looks up, and the morning light catches in her eyes. "You're here reading them, aren't you?" You stand slowly, feeling the way your muscles protest, an exhaustion that's more spiritual than physical. You realize that every place she's led you has demanded something: belief, doubt, surrender. And this place demands the simplest thing of all: acknowledgement. You lay your palm flat against the pillar. The stone is cold at first, but a warmth seeps into your skin, a memory not yours, a whisper that tastes like salt and iron. Maybe it's just imagination, maybe not. The silence lengthens until the city begins to stir. You hear the first vendors rolling carts over the paving stones, the rhythmic slap of shutters being opened, the low mutter of tired voices testing themselves against the day. Rodigan rises and gestures for you to follow. You walk together up a street that winds toward the ridge. From this height, you can see the city unfurling. Domes and temples, rows of tiled roofs, alleys veined with shadow. For a moment, you just stand there, breathing in the sight. You think about how much you've seen and how little has truly changed. "You asked me what happens now," she says finally. "I remember." Her expression softens. I can't answer that for you. Then why did you bring me here? To show you that nothing is hidden forever, she says. Not even the things you bury so deep you start believing they never existed. A fringe tidbit. There were sects in the late Republic who believed the city itself was alive. A vast organism fed by the ambitions and failings of everyone who walked its streets. They claimed that if you stood still long enough, you could hear it breathing. You look at Radagon. Is this where you leave me? Not yet, she says. One more place. You descend the ridge in silence, feeling dawn at your back. At the bottom of the hill, the road broadens into a plaza you recognize, the same one you crossed so many times without seeing its edges. But this morning, it feels different. Less like a marketplace and more like a stage waiting for its actors. In the center stands a tree, not blackened like the others you've seen. This one is alive, its branches full of small white blossoms that catch the light like tiny lamps. The petals tremble in the faint wind, and you feel something in your chest unclench. Radagon approaches the tree and touches the bark. This is the place where forgetting ends, she says. And remembering begins? You ask. No, she says gently. Where remembering becomes choice. You walk forward until you're close enough to smell the blossoms, faintly sweet, familiar in a way you can't name. Your hand hovers over the bark, but you don't touch it yet. What happens if I do? You whisper. Radagon watches you. Then you will never be able to say you didn't know. One mainstream fact. Roman processions often began and ended at sacred trees, symbols of continuity in a city obsessed with conquest. Historians still argue whether these rites were superstition or subtle reminders that all empires grow from something older than ambition. The wind shifts, and a flurry of petals falls between you. One catches in your hair, cool against your skin. You close your eyes, feeling a steadiness you didn't expect. When you open them, Radagon is watching you with a softness that has nothing to do with pity. You're ready, she says. You don't argue. You press your palm to the trunk. The moment your skin meets the bark, you feel it. Every name, every story, every unspoken grief braided into the grain, not as separate strands, but as a single, endless song. And for the first time, you realize this is all any city ever is. The accumulation of voices no one could completely silence. When you lift your hand, the blossoms are still trembling, but the hush in the plaza feels gentler now, as if Rome itself is exhaling. You look at Radagon. What will you do? She tilts her head. I will keep walking. And me? She smiles. You will decide. You step back. The dawn has become full day, and the city begins to fill with life. Carts creaking, traders shouting, children shrieking their games into the warming air. It's all exactly as it was. Except it isn't. Because you are not. You walk forward into the light, feeling the last weight of the night settle into something you can carry. Not a burden, a trust. And as you go, you understand that remembering is the oldest rebellion there is. The city grows quieter behind you as you walk, the morning settling into its rhythms. Merchants calling their prices, wheels creaking over cobbles, the hush of prayers whispered to household shrines. The sunlight softens the edges of everything it touches. Even the scars in the stones look gentle in this glow. You breathe deeply, feeling how your chest rises without effort, how the weight you carried isn't gone, just transformed into something you can bear. Memory is like that, heavy, but never only a burden. It is also proof that you were here, that you saw, that you cared enough to stay awake when forgetting would have been easier. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a bell toll. The sound rolls over rooftops and dissolves into the air, a reminder that time never stops, not for empires or for the people who survive them. You pause, letting the final note fade before you take another step. Maybe you feel the presence of Radagon nearby, or maybe she's become part of you, her voice folded into the way you now hear the city. The certainty that every silent place holds a story waiting to be spoken. The knowledge that not every truth needs an audience to matter. The street you follow is broad and bright, lined with buildings that have outlived generations. Their facades are cracked, their paint faded, but they stand anyway. Proof that endurance isn't always beautiful, and the survival is its own quiet defiance. You slow your pace. No one hurries you. The city can wait. The memories press against your ribs like a heartbeat. They don't demand anything. They simply exist, patient and abiding. You know now that this is all memory ever asks: to be acknowledged, to be carried forward, to be offered in small, unremarkable acts. A word spoken, a name remembered, a story shared before sleep. You reach a small plaza where children are drawing patterns in the dust. One lifts her head, meeting your gaze with solemn curiosity. You nod to her, and she nods back, as though she too understands that remembering is an inheritance. The day is beginning. The noise will return soon, voices rising, trades struck, arguments flaring. But for now, there is stillness enough to feel how every story you've witnessed lingers in the stones and the air, woven into the city's heartbeat. You did well tonight. You listened. You remembered. You allowed yourself to be changed. And in a world so eager to forget, that is a rare and quiet triumph. Let your breath slow. Let the weight you carried become something softer, a presence rather than a burden. The city will still be here tomorrow, and so will the stories you've claimed as your own. Sleep well, keeper of memories. We'll speak again soon.